Peter Wellman James masterminded a $20 million cannabis operation by exploiting a critical regulatory ATM loophole. Centered in Darwin, the network utilized a legitimate ATM to-go franchise to launder vast drug profits. By loading dirty cash directly into machines, James bypassed bank scrutiny, integrating millions into the financial system as clean withdrawals. His 2022 conviction and 12-year sentence exposed deep systemic flaws, sparking major 2025 legislative reforms to dismantle shadow cash cycles across Australia. The strategic architecture of the James enterprise. What powered Peter Wellman James's $20 million operation wasn't just the product. It was how carefully every moving part was connected. The supply chain and the cash flow were built to work as one system. In the Northern Territory, especially across the Darwin metro area, demand for high-quality cannabis stayed consistently strong. The region's isolation played a key role. Limited access pushed prices up, creating market premiums that didn't exist in the southern states. James understood early on that, at this level, the hardest part of running a large distribution network wasn't sourcing or moving cannabis. It was handling the money that came afterward. Large volumes of cash brought risk, particularly from Austrac. The real challenge was finding a way to place that money into circulation and move it through layers without setting off alerts. Managing those proceeds quietly became the backbone of the entire operation. The Darwin market dynamics. Darwin sat at the center of everything. As the Northern Territory's main logistical hub, it offered direct access to both urban buyers and far-flung regional communities. That made it the perfect base for a network designed to push product into remote areas where cannabis sold for much higher prices. Those inflated margins are what drove the network's estimated $20 million value. James structured his operation to take full advantage of the price gap between the territory and the southern states. Commercial quantities of cannabis moved steadily through Darwin, while a legitimate business front created the appearance of lawful income, shielding the true source of the cash. The selection of the ATM franchise. Choosing ATM to-go Darwin as the primary front was a calculated move. Unlike restaurants or laundromats, businesses that rely on stock, staff, and daily sales, an ATM business revolves entirely around cash. Handling large sums of physical currency is not suspicious in that industry. It's expected. That gave James the ability to hold, transport, and move millions of dollars under the explanation of routine servicing and maintenance for his machines. Cash wasn't a byproduct of the business, it was the business itself. During the 2022 court proceedings, evidence showed that James already had a prior drug conviction when he acquired the franchise. Despite that, he was able to own and operate a company built around the distribution of cash. That fact exposed a serious gap in oversight within the independent ATM industry. Without a proper fit and proper person test for operators, the door was left open, and James walked straight through it. The mechanics of the shadow cash cycle. The laundering system behind the network was simple, precise, and highly effective. It exploited the basic way private ATMs interact with the banking system. In a standard setup, the ATM owner supplies the physical cash loaded into the machine. When someone withdraws $100, the ATM logs the transaction, and the customer's bank electronically transfers that amount, plus fees, into the operator's account. The loading phase, direct placement. In James's operation, the cash loaded into ATM to-go Darwin machines didn't come from banks or armored transport services. It came straight from cannabis sales. This removed the need for the riskiest step in laundering, depositing large sums of cash into a bank. By loading drug proceeds directly into ATM cartridges, James avoided bank tellers, cash deposit machines, and the reporting thresholds that could trigger scrutiny or threshold transaction reports. The withdrawal phase, unwitting complicity. The final stage relied on everyday customers, people using ATMs across Darwin, at pubs, clubs, and shopping centers, were unknowingly withdrawing money generated by drug sales. Once that cash came out of the machine, it was effectively cleaned. For the customer, it was a routine withdrawal. For the network, it marked the moment dirty money re-entered the legitimate economy, stripped of its criminal origins. origins. The settlement phase, integration. Once the cash was withdrawn, the final step happened quietly in the background. The banking system settled the transaction electronically. The customer's bank transferred the funds straight into James's business account. At that point, the money was fully integrated. What had started as physical cash from cannabis sales now appeared as legitimate electronic credits. Inside the ATM 2Go Darwin accounts, those funds looked clean. They were supported by standard bank transfers and matched recorded ATM transactions. To auditors or tax officials, it appeared to be nothing more than income generated by a busy network of machines spread across Darwin, tracking the physical trail. The first real cracks in the operation likely appeared on the ground. Running a network of this size required constant movement, transporting cannabis, servicing machines, and shifting cash. Surveillance at known drug distribution points in Darwin began to overlap with the routes used to maintain the ATM 2Go machines. Investigators also noticed something that didn't add up. The amount of physical cash James was handling didn't align with what his ATM locations should have been generating. The numbers were off, and the gap was too large to ignore. Forensic accounting and data synthesis. The strongest evidence came from comparing what the machines recorded electronically with how cash actually moved. Forensic accountants identified a critical absence. In a legitimate ATM business, cash used to stock machines is withdrawn from the company's bank accounts. That step never appeared in James's records. The money floating the machines wasn't coming from the business accounts at all. That meant it had to be coming from somewhere else. The only explanation was an undisclosed external source, the cannabis operation itself. This case didn't come together overnight. The investigation stretched across several years, covering the period when the network was at its peak and valued at $20 million. When authorities finally combined the drug supply evidence with the financial data, prosecutors were able to pursue the highest penalties available under Northern Territory law. The judicial conclusion, the 2022 sentencing. In 2022, Peter Wellman James stood before the Supreme Court of the Northern Territory to face charges tied to supplying commercial quantities of cannabis and laundering the proceeds. The court's findings painted a clear picture of a system designed to exploit weaknesses in the financial framework. The 12-year mandate. James was sentenced to 12 years in prison. The length of the sentence reflected both the scale of the operation and the level of planning involved. The court highlighted several aggravating factors. The network had run for an extended period and reached an estimated value of $20 million while distributing cannabis on a commercial scale. The use of a legitimate ATM franchise to launder money was treated as a serious breach of trust that damaged confidence in the financial system. James's prior drug convictions showed that this was not a first offense, but a continuation of long-standing criminal behavior. The sentence wasn't just about one individual. It sent a clear warning that using white-collar business fronts to disguise drug trafficking would carry heavy prison terms. Systematic vulnerabilities and the ATM sector. The case exposed deep flaws in how Australia's ATM industry is regulated. While banks have faced intense scrutiny since the 2018 Royal Commission, the independent ATM deployer sector has largely operated in a regulatory grey area. The white label risk. The machines James relied on were so-called white label ATMs. They weren't owned by major banks but by private operators who supplied and managed their own cash. That self-funded model was the weakness James exploited. Because the owner is responsible for loading the machines, there's no centralized oversight confirming where the physical cash comes from. That made it possible for criminal proceeds to be inserted directly into the financial system. Regulatory failures in vetting. One of the most troubling findings was that a convicted drug dealer was able to pass the vetting process of an ATM franchisor. In most financial sectors, that history would have been an automatic barrier. The James case triggered urgent calls for a nationwide fit and proper person test for all independent ATM operators. The ripple effect, illegal tobacco and the 2025 reforms. The techniques perfected by James didn't disappear after his arrest. They became a template. Other illicit industries, especially illegal tobacco, adopted the same approach. By 2024 and 2025, investigations revealed that private ATMs were being used almost identically to launder profits from illegal cigarette and vape sales. The tobacco connection. In Queensland and other regions, authorities found illegal tobacco shops fitted with private ATMs. These machines allowed cash from under-the-counter sales to be converted into clean bank deposits. The scale of the problem pushed pushed lawmakers to act, leading to the Tobacco and Other Smoking Products, Dismantling Illegal Trade, and Other Legislation Amendment Bill 2025. The ABC investigations and public pressure. The role of investigative journalism was crucial, especially the work done by ABC investigations into Australia's private ATM sector. Those reports pulled the curtain back on how dirty cash was being cycled through legitimate machines. For the first time, the public could clearly see how the $20 million network linked to Peter Wellman James fit into a wider rise in organised crime across the country. That exposure mattered. Public awareness quickly turned into pressure, and that pressure pushed governments to act. By 2025, legislative reform became unavoidable, driven by a growing demand to shut down what had become known as the ATM loophole. The future of financial crime prevention in the top end. The fallout from the James case permanently reshaped how financial crime is approached in the Northern Territory. His network became a real-world example of how organised crime can operate openly without attracting attention. It showed how easily illegal money could hide inside everyday business activity. In response, Northern Territory police and financial regulators shifted toward a more connected way of working. Drug investigations and financial monitoring were no longer treated as separate lanes. Instead, they began feeding into each other in real time. Technological deterrence. One of the key changes now being rolled out is real-time monitoring of private ATM activity. By comparing a machine's transaction patterns with the income declared by its owner, authorities can spot inconsistencies much earlier. When the digital activity of an ATM doesn't match the financial reality behind it, it raises immediate red flags that the machine may be serving a criminal purpose rather than a legitimate one. Community and business impact. For Darwin's business community, the case landed as a wake-up call. It showed how easily criminal operations can embed themselves within local commerce. Even though ATM2Go is a legitimate franchise, the brand suffered serious reputational damage in the region. It was a clear example of how established businesses can become collateral damage when criminals exploit trusted corporate structures. Synthesizing the case, a final perspective. The $20 million cannabis network built by Peter Wellman James is not just a story about drugs or greed. It's a lesson in how modern crime actually works. This was an operation built for the digital age, moving at the speed of electronic banking rather than street-level deals. James understood something critical. In today's world, the most powerful weapon isn't violence. It's paperwork that looks normal. Clean transaction records, routine bank transfers, and legitimate-looking businesses did more to protect the network than secrecy ever could. The 12-year sentence handed down in 2022 marked a win for the justice system, but the reforms still unfolding in 2025 make it clear the fight isn't over. Private ATMs remain a serious risk point, and the methods exposed in this case will continue to shape Australia's anti-money laundering strategies for years. As the Northern Territory continues to deal with the damage caused by large-scale drug distribution, the James case stands as a lasting warning. The most dangerous criminal networks aren't always the loudest. They're the ones that know how to make dirty money blend in. The empire itself may be gone, but the weaknesses it revealed are only now being fully addressed by a system that, for a time, was outrun by the very machines it was meant to control. The depth of planning behind the James operation, combining franchise law, banking technology, and regional drug logistics, marks it as a defining chapter in Australia's organised crime history. It's a case that will continue to be studied by police, regulators, and financial analysts working to protect the line between the legitimate economy and the hidden world that tries to live inside it.